Hello, everyone. This is Bob Treemore. I am joined once again with Dr. David Miller. We wanted to get together. I think we're going to do a few of these, right, David?
That's the plan.
All right, good, good. Well, today, since it's been a while since we talked, I think we wanted to do kind of echo chamber what Peloton is doing, and that is a pause and reflect. They're taking a couple days off here in mid-October, and so we do a pause and reflect. I think we're going to look kind of the state of the game, look where kind of things are in the near-term outlook of Peloton. Is that about right? Sound good to you?
I think so much has happened, since we talked with the earnings and announcements and the seasonal change, right? So I put a sweatshirt on, one of my old
Yeah.
hoodies. It's fall up here, and so right, maybe follow the lead of our overlords at
That's
Peloton
right.
and pause and reflect
I tell
here.
you, I took a pause very briefly. We just got through Hurricane Ian down here in Florida.
Absolutely.
And I had to take about a week off of Peloton to take care of a few trees that were falling down and rake some leaves and do things like that. But fortunately, everything's fine and dandy.
Glad to hear.
So let's jump into it. I guess we want to cover a few things, but kind of the state of the game where Peloton's at right now. What we have on the screen right now is it's kind of the hardware, or at least what they've done recently and what they're doing here the next few months. And we've got a couple new light green things that popped up. But you want to walk us through what you think is important
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, so like you point out on this chart, a lot going on. I think the light green is the Amazon, the Dick's, the Hilton, the distribution channels. For so long, Peloton's strategy was controlling the channels. You either went into a store or went to their website. That was how they did it. Obviously, they've decided to alter that dramatically, starting with Amazon, now into Dick's. Hilton's just putting more of them out there, some sales maybe. And then in that same vein of moving hardware is, the one I don't want to avoid also is the rower, because both you and I think we're lucky enough to try it out.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a big, I think, question mark, like distribution. Like, what are you distributing? Because sometimes there's signals that we're all about software and content, and then something like the rower comes out at a very high price point, very technically leading in the category. So that's another big question, I think, beyond just the distribution channels.
Will the rower, and I know you've seen it. I did a 30-minute video on rower, so I don't want to go too much back into it because I just got done with it. But is the rower the last piece of significant hardware that Peloton's going to produce?
It's a great question. It's an important question because that's really the existential question, right? Are they really still a world-class hardware company that also is the world-class software provider, or are they going more what's been messaged? One thing I noticed, and I think I'm right here, if you look at the Rower press release, it actually quotes Tom Cortese. It does not quote the CEO, Barry McCarthy. And so that, to your point, is this the last remaining hardware from the original team? I can't resist. It's been about 4 years since I went to the Tread launch up in New York, which was another kind of blow your mind piece of hardware,
Yeah.
very Apple-like with video testing out, and that's where I think the Row release has been interesting from that perspective. I think they did a good job by putting it out in stores and letting people come in. And that's where, more on the consumer side, I don't know what you saw when you were there. Like, I went in and there was a stream of people
Is that
coming.
right?
I had to get off because people were coming. I did not have an official appointment.
No, I'm on the East Coast and I went at the store open, which was 10 a.m. Actually, I got there at like 9:50. So I was one of the first public people to actually get in, and I was the only one in the store. They had just finished unboxing and setting it up. So,
And,
but
and
yeah,
do
my opinion is this could, if we take out the pre-core aspect and perhaps refabbing pre-core machines to include Peloton content, if we put that aside because pre-core is a whole nother issue. I think this could be the last significant piece of hardware we see out of Peloton for several years.
it's a great question. I mean, I think hardware is the key to their survival, but
I agree.
it's a different hardware question. It's moving. It's
I agree. And
moving.
I was talking to someone just the other day on Twitter. There are a couple things, and we don't need to go into this in depth, but there are a couple things Peloton needs to keep just to keep. they need to keep hardware just because it's part of the company's DNA. If they just remove themselves entirely from hardware, it becomes something else. It removes the attachment that the community is so attracted to. In addition to that, apparel, which probably is a net zero income stream for them. I think in an ideal world, they just like to drop it and maybe just have a store with some bottles and some shirts that other people make. But I think it motivates people. It builds their email list. It keeps morale up. It keeps people trafficked to the Peloton store. So those two things, they got to stay in hardware. They got to stay in apparel just to keep the community excited and engaged. If they just
Well,
drop everything and become digital, it's just going to become another
I,
tech company.
I have to, and it's not even that right there. It's that going back to the early days, but even today, even though the new moves, the rentals, things like that change,
Yeah.
when you paid for a piece of hardware and when you pay now, still you're making an investment, and it's at two levels. One, it's your physical fitness. You're
Right.
saying I'm actually putting money down, like joining a health club and signing a contract. You're in. You've put money in. But secondly, and this is an important one for Peloton, it's an investment in where you live, your place.
Yeah.
Having this machine, whether it's a bike, a tread, now a row, I don't even know what the thing is called, the strength machine,
Oh, right.
the strength machine,
The guide.
the guide. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. No one knows what it is.
I
Don't
almost
worry
called
about
it
it.
the source. Yes, and that's not planned. The guide. It's investing in your place where you live, having convenience and access, and adding the value. So I don't think it's something that they should take lightly. That's something you just let go, because it changes the way people, to your point, have a relationship with the company. It is still the bike that goes nowhere. I mean, I like to joke, will it become the app that goes nowhere if it's really just, and that's where I think, our leaderships, at the CEO level, the difference is Spotify and Netflix are pure consumables. You don't have to work.
Right.
They're not part that you don't, there's no buy-in there. This is a buy-in, including the bike. So I agree, they need it. It's the DNA, and people want hardware in their home. It's not that, that's still a lost category. It's an amazing category. And I think it will be interesting to see how the road does.
Yeah.
But moving bikes is something that, is one of the existential threats, just fixing the balance sheet and fixing the inventory.
And speaking of moving bikes, before we leave this area here, we've got Amazon and Dick's join the club, as well as Hilton. And if you follow me on Twitter, plug for Bob Treemore, I actually tipped off Dick's and Hilton before either of those were announced. But I've maintained. First of all, let me set the foundation. I probably have a lot of not great aspects I'm excited about with what Barry has done, but overall, I'm behind Barry. I think he's doing what has to be done, but I do have obviously some tidbits I'm not excited about. Amazon and Dick's, I think, are fantastic. The de facto online marketplace, they're there. A lot of people don't like it. I like it. Dick's, now you can, it is a buy it now point of sale service where if you want a Peloton on Thursday, you go out Thursday morning, buy it, and bring it home because they're self-assembled nowadays. So what is your perspective on the whole Amazon and Dick's?
I think it's great from the perspective of increasing distribution, figuring out how to move bikes. I don't think it's going to move the needle. I'm open, like you're saying, to needing to move bikes. I think the bigger challenge they're going to have, and is you have these different eras of Peloton. I'll look back, some years. It's important. Between, let's say, 2014 and 2020, before the pandemic, Peloton was a must-have item to the people who knew what it was.
Yeah.
But it was because of its content and because of the community and because it was convenient. And I'm not going to lie, it's because it had live studio classes all day. It used to say it on the truck, live studio fitness in the comfort of your own, convenience of your own home. And so it became getting to see a community at the same time, getting together. Then during the pandemic, it became must-have because there was nothing else. And that pandemic cohort is bigger than the original cohort. So for them, it was must-have because they had no other choice. I don't think that community is still wild by it. So the fact that they're still not producing as much live content and must-see content as we used to say in the old days, rides you have to show up for, community group rides. That's to me still the bigger threat because that's what moves bikes. When somebody says you have to do this, you have to meet me for this ride, you have to try it. They're back now to being a traditional company where can we get the best distribution?
Yeah.
Where can we put our ad dollars, which is another thing, leadership changes. That's going to change pretty soon where they're doing their marketing spend, we hope. But they're now into more traditional and strategy and tactics instead of having the product that blows you away on the content side. So I think they need to fix that. I'm all supportive for the Amazon and the Dicks.
Yeah.
In a sense, it puts more pressure on the content.
It does, because the hardware, I will argue, oh, I don't think I even need to argue, has become somewhat commoditized. Back in the day, a stationary bike with a 22-inch monitor attached to it was unique to Peloton, but now it's commoditized. Echelon, Nordic Track, you name it, it's a commodity. The only thing that is still pulling Peloton apart from the others is the content. But let's if we could, David, let's
I'll
keep
go real
moving on.
quick though, just to finish off. When you go to Dick's and they have 5 other bikes, they're not going to push you on the content like the retail
You're right.
showrooms do.
You're right.
Their success rate is going to drop, right? The visitors per sale. So that's why the content has to be, oh, I heard about this Robin ride or Cody ride, and this is like. So I hope they can get that back. So yes, you want to move on, Bob.
I think in perhaps it's the next video or the video after, we're going to talk about community talent, meaning the instructors and things of that engagement. So let's just, before we get in further, we got a couple other things. Obviously, we have BB, before Barry, as I like to say it, we got Foley, and nowadays it's Barry's company. And then, as you kind of mentioned earlier, look at this. This is the, well, I guess the not wanted poster of Peloton former employees.
And even that, I'll say, because I've been watching for a long time, as have you, there's even generations within there. There's those that built it and suffered in the early days when nobody knew what it was. And there's those who kind of came along and, like some of the instructors, to be frank, were celebrated just because they got jobs there. And so they've all been moved out except one. I think Tom Cortese,
right.
Product is really the only remaining. And like I mentioned earlier, he's the row. So that's kind of it. And I'm sure this pun's been made, sink or swim, I'm guessing, with that one.
And neither of us revel in people losing their positions, but I think we're both assured that these are well experienced people who landed in equally nice jobs where they went. That said,
do
you think any of these individuals voluntarily left, or do you think Barry either pushed them or said it's to your best interest to leave?
Oh, I don't want to go through them and I don't want to share, but I think they generally all voluntarily were pushed out, except for, I think John Foley. So I think the stock kept.
He was hanging in there. I mean, he went to the board. He wanted to stay in.
And I think the stock was the barometer. And I will say this, and it's very, maybe controversial. I noticed that Adam Newman of WeWork fame just raised $350 million. And I like John Foley. I would back him on something else. I'm not going to lie. I think he's a big thinker. And again, they got way off track in the pandemic. There's others, though, that you could tell by my voice, I don't have the same quite feeling about. And so I think they were moved out. They'll all survive. I mean, that's the other interesting thing about it. It's still a badge of honor, no matter.
Yeah, it is. Absolutely.
I mean, and you can see it on LinkedIn. I know you follow LinkedIn closely to understand hiring and what that means for trends and positions and growth. But there's a general trend on LinkedIn to be positively an ex-Peloton employee, and I think they're all. Most of those, I should say, are being celebrated. If people do their Googling, they'll see one or two were not celebrated on the exit, and that's
yeah. Well, we're sorry to see them go, and I as well. I never really had anything bad to say about John Foley as an individual. As an individual, I think he's a tremendous person. Obviously, he was stuck with a bag full of waste that he had to deal with, and he did what he thought best at the time. But I think
It's
it was time to move to
well,
Barry.
and I'm on Twitter, but I'll plug my book. I talked about it in my book, Hubris. You know, I could see it coming, and he's not the first, and he won't be the
Yeah,
last. That you know, the media, the stock market, thank you, everything is telling you you're the best, you're the smartest,
yeah.
everything you do is correct, and it's hard to check yourself sometimes. And this because of the pandemic became a fantastic change of fortunes very quickly, as we can see in almost all of the charts. Though I want to keep it positive, because I think one of the things that's interesting when you talk about the stock market and investing, you know, what are the alternatives if you're a customer, like you referenced earlier, the content. I think their hardware is still great. Like, I shouldn't say this out loud, but I'm still on a Tread Plus, and there's still nothing like it. There's still nothing like a Tread
No.
Plus. We still love our bike. The row is fantastic, but I think when we look at this chart, you see the membership is still strong. If flat, still an amazing value, you know, as a
Yeah.
community pays money on a monthly basis in, you know, active users that pay, and that's one of the positives.
So
You
let's
know,
point out a couple of the highlights of the chart. We're gonna end it here in just a few minutes, but the last two quarters, the purple line, just to make it legible for folks, the purple line is members, those who aren't necessarily paying, the family members, extended members. It includes the members who are paying, but also the extended members. And then the blue bars are the paying members around here, 3 million. This is Connected Fitness. We also have the digital app people, which is another million, which I don't think is reflected in this chart. But we can see in the last two quarters, both the purple and the blue have either largely remained the same or declined a little bit. And I think that's large. I would say two things. But David, what do you, I think it's largely there was the whole $39 to $44 a month increase announced and then enacted around this time period. And then obviously we have the economy, right?
I think a couple of things. I think post pandemic, I think people who had purchased the bike and because they had no other choice. And I've met people, because I still do the social media, I still talk to people. People checked out. I think some people, frankly, got bored with it over the
Hmm.
last couple years. I know a lot of long-term members, and this is a positive thing, but it's a danger in the business model. They evolve out of Peloton. I've met multiple people who have given their bikes to other people because they've moved on to road cycling or going back to the gym and wanting a more diverse fitness. So I think it's kind of a swirl of things that are slowing down the growth of the economy.
Yeah.
I think the pricing inconsistency, to be honest with you, it's
Terrible.
confusing
It's terrible.
to know what you're paying for and why you're paying what, when all of a sudden you can rent it. And, you know, so I think there's, you know, kind of a range of reasons that you see that kind of
So
flatlining.
when we see the next quarter, when we look at these blue and purple bars,
Mhm.
what do you forecast these blue and purple bars in relation to the ones we on the chart, the next ones? Where are they going to be? Are they going to go up, down, or stay the same?
This is going to be one where, you know, I think it's going to be minimal growth. You know, there will be some holiday sales, I think, if I'm getting my quarters right, or maybe I'm too early on that. There'll be some of that seasonality. I think that the bigger questions, and this is still what I don't think they're figuring out quite yet, the new leadership is any business, the best customer is your current customer. And so I think they need to figure out not necessarily how to get the 44 up, but how to get more money out of their current customers, whether it
That's a
offering
great
them,
point.
you know, I still think, you know, when, you know, one of the feedback you see right now on the Hilton deal is every time I go to a Peloton bike, it's not serviced well when at a hotel. And I agree with that. I've been to many bikes. So the question is, I've always said they should have a service arm. You've had people who've had these bikes for years, or license, you know, local shops to be licensed service dealers who can fix the bike. And maybe all of a sudden you're selling service plans for $200 a year. That's 4 or 5 months of membership. So I guess my point is they need to be more creative on the revenue. If we've accepted that our hardware sales are declining, and that's where you
Yeah.
got big revenue, you know,
Well,
$1,200 at a time, 2,000 at a time, and you're dropping to 44, then you need to, and that's what I hope to see. And incrementally, I'm going to go with your chart. Did Amazon, all these new channels, Dick's, did they really move it?
yeah.
I went, I looked at, even looked at Hilton today on my honors app
Hmm.
to see anything. There's nothing there yet.
Nothing there.
The announcement, says you can get an app deal. I don't know if they're going to run, for example, content in the hotel rooms. I think would be smart as a
I
lead.
agree. I
That
agree.
was not in the press release. So that's, I guess, my question is, are they still too blunt? Have they figured out the value of where to really put their content and how to connect?
So I think the focus, I think both of us would agree in the near term, is hardware is what it is. The focus needs to be focus will be removed from hardware once Rower actually hits, but it's already been announced and people are pre-ordering it, so that's that. Two things that interest is the additional channels, Amazon and Dick's. Are those going to cannibalize sales from the online store, or are they going to actually add sales? That's one, because those are both big moves for Peloton and certainly out of their comfort zone. And then the other, not to point anyone specifically on this page, is messaging, and that's not been great. And we're gonna, I think, probably gonna do an entire series on that. And I'm hoping messaging will change drastically in the upcoming time. But we just gotta. What are your final closing thoughts here, David?
My final closing thoughts are: I hope they can, your point, re-engage the community, make sure those channels are successful. That when people get into Dick's or when they go on to Amazon, their questions are answered. I do hope that it lessens the balance sheet impact, that somehow some of these people are taking on the inventory and sharing some of that cost. And then the last thing that we didn't really get into that much today is turnover in talent. Are some talent going to decide and they've got one foot out the door? And I'm not getting into the minor talent. I'm getting into the bigger talent because there is a challenge when your company is going sideways and backwards of retaining talent and customers. That's to me, and that's my one question for you. You went in and saw the road. Did you order it? Do you have any trepidation about buying a very expensive piece of hardware
If it
from?
was not, and I did a whole video on it, if it was not $3,195, which I said probably about 30 times on my video, I would have considered buying it. But we'll close it out here, and we'll pick it up in the next time we get together. But one thing we can agree on certainly is that the reins have fully shifted. The gentleman on the, I guess as you're looking at it on the left, Mr. Foley, that Peloton has been officially retired. We are now fully in Berry Plus land, and will be hopefully for the foreseeable future. I don't want to see another change. Let's
No,
stay the course.
I'm excited, and I request that our next discussion be on Berryland and content creation, because that's where Netflix and Spotify
Yeah,
blew up. And let's talk about all the kind of interesting content out there on the
good.
platform.
Well, Dr. Miller, pleasure to speak with you again, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.